Hey, Mom, bring me a beer.
Huh? Mother-in-law, did you lose your hearing all of a sudden?
You can hear me, right? Hey, I told you to bring me a beer.
This is how it always goes when my son and his wife speak to me. We've been living together for 5 years, and they've never listened to me, always ignoring what I have to say. When they do speak to me, it's always just orders, like I'm some sort of maid. Jean, my daughter-in-law, speaks ill of me for everyone to hear, and Paul, my son, treats me like a housekeeper without a second thought. Ignoring them, I turn my back and pretend to watch the TV, acting as if I can't hear them. I'm at the end of my tether with these two, who only listen when they want something, but ignore me otherwise. After a while of ignoring them, Jean picks up the TV remote and shuts off the show I was watching. Startled, I looked up when she said loudly right into my ear, "Hey, mother-in-law, can you hear me? Make sure you prepare Paul's lunch tomorrow, got it?" Her voice was so loud that it made my ears ring and I involuntarily grimaced. Seeing this, my daughter-in-law laughed, saying, "Seems like you heard it," and left the living room with my son. Wouldn't she at least try to be a bit more considerate, since I am, after all, her husband's mother, and she relies on me on a daily basis? That's what I thought. But judging from my son's attitude, I'm probably nothing more than a housemaid in her eyes. In the end, there was no apology from the two of them, nor did I feel any consideration towards me. Feeling frustrated, I sent an email to my husband and decided to leave the house. My name is Karen. I will be turning 72 this year. 5 years ago, my son and his wife asked if they could live with me, because they were worried about the future and wanted to save money. Ever since then, we have been living together as two families under one roof.
If you live with us, you'll feel safer, right, Mom?
You might be right. My husband is a workaholic who started his own company when he was young and continues to work tirelessly, even at the age of 73. Because of his nature, the house felt quiet ever since our son moved out. Even when I consulted my husband about our son and his wife moving in with us, his only response was,
"Do whatever you like."
So as there wasn't much conversation and I felt a bit bored, I agreed to live together, hoping that life would become a bit more lively. When we started living together, Jean, my son's wife, and I split our housework. However, as she started saying, "My part-time job is getting busier," the workload for me gradually increased. Although she helps out when asked, she often does so reluctantly, goes out on her days off, or lazes around in her room, so I stopped asking for her help. I ended up taking on all the household tasks, and it became the norm, making me feel unappreciated. Even during meal times when the whole family is present, there is hardly any conversation. I suppose I've been numb to this, as it was the same way with my husband. One day, while I was preparing dinner for 3 as usual, I received a message from my husband saying,
"I'll be late for work. Don't eat dinner."
This was not unusual, but the problem was with my son and his wife.
"Dad's coming home late, huh? I don't eat dinner either."
"Oh, I'm going out with a friend, so I don't need it either." "Why are you telling me this now? I've already made it," I exclaimed.
"It's fine, just leave it for tomorrow."
Despite it being dinner time, if I didn't say anything, they were about to go without a word. They could have told me if I didn't need to prepare them dinner in the first place. As long as they weren't inconvenienced, they would never even reach out to me first. I couldn't help but complain at their rudeness, but they left without a hint of remorse. What am I working so hard for? In the quiet living room, I was staring blankly at the dinner I had already prepared, which would now go to waste. What on earth am I doing? Thinking about it made me feel utterly exhausted. I covered the still warm dinner with plastic wrap, put it in the fridge, and decided to go to bed. The next morning when I came down to the living room, my husband, who had woken up earlier, apologized, saying,
"I'm sorry."
As usual, our exchange was brief. It should have ended there, but seeing the look on my face, my husband furrowed his brows slightly and asked,
Didn't Paul and his wife eat dinner?
Huh? No, they said they didn't eat dinner and went out.
I see.
I guess he saw the dinner for 3 in the fridge and asked. I was happy to have a conversation after a long time, so I told my husband about what happened last night. My reticent husband sat quietly, listening to me. After hearing me out, he gently said,
You don't have to push yourself.
He acknowledged,
Our son's attitude is getting worse day by day.
But if I don't take care of the house, nobody will, right?
That doesn't mean you have to overdo it.
His words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I realized that I had been pushing myself, and was happy that my husband understood this. My son and his wife aren't small children anymore, so there was no need for me to work so hard. With that thought, my view of the situation seemed to brighten.
I might be late from work again, so you don't need to prepare dinner for me tonight.
Okay, I said, smiling at my husband's words. I decided to let my son and his wife understand this as well. Despite it being a Sunday, I waved goodbye to my husband and resolved to rebel against my son and his wife. After my husband left, my son and his wife finally woke up in the afternoon. Still in their pajamas, they came into the living room and immediately asked,
What's for lunch?
Why don't you eat what's left from yesterday?
But you could at least warm it up for us, or set it on the table.
You're not small children, you can do it yourself. Well, mother-in-law, you are getting old, aren't you? Jean, my daughter-in-law, joked with a laugh, which prompted Paul, my son, to join in the laughter while looking at me. I'm exhausted because Jean hasn't been helping with the housework at all. Oh, can't you manage without me? Is it your menopause or something? Jean retorted, laughing at me. I could only sigh at their attitudes. The two of them went back to their room without cleaning up after eating, seemingly unbothered. As expected, my husband didn't return until late that night. Since I didn't need to prepare dinner for my husband, I bought myself a ready-made meal from the supermarket.
Huh, Mom? What are you eating?
Ready-made food.
What about dinner?
I don't know. Mother-in-law, what are you thinking? Have you forgotten about your family? I wondered if Jean was incapable of having a conversation without throwing in some barb. I decided to ignore my daughter-in-law, which seemed to quiet Paul down. However, he quickly picked up his phone and started complaining again.
You don't work, Mom. You should at least take care of the house.
I thought that since it was their day off, they could prepare their own meals for once. As I thought this, they decided to order a delivery.
Give us the money later,
Paul said, which made me lose my patience. Since they wanted to save, I agreed to not let them pay our living expense, and I never bothered them about it. But I never imagined them to take advantage of me like this. I decided to ignore them completely, not providing any services to my son and daughter-in-law, who showed such disrespect.
Hey, Mom, beer.
Oh, has mother-in-law suddenly gone deaf?
You can hear us, right? We're asking for beer,
Paul demanded, while Jean kept on making snide remarks, and Paul talked to me like I was their housemaid. Ignoring them, I turned my back and deliberately watched TV, pretending not to hear. When I didn't respond for a while, she seemed to give up and stop talking to me. But this peace was short-lived. Before I knew it, my daughter-in-law, who had come up behind me, picked up the TV remote and turned off the TV. Startled, I looked up, only for her to shout into my ear. Hey, mother-in-law, can you hear me? Make sure to prepare lunch for Paul tomorrow, okay? Her voice was so loud that it hurt my ears, making me wince involuntarily. Looking at me, my daughter-in-law laughed, saying, Looks like she heard me, and left the living room with Paul. I wondered why she didn't consider showing a bit of courtesy, given that I'm her husband's mother, and she depends on me regularly. But observing Paul's attitude, it seemed like I was nothing more than a housemaid to her. As it turned out, there was no sign of consideration for me at all, and I didn't even hear an apology for last night's dinner from either of them. Sighing deeply, I sent a text to my husband and decided to leave the house. Early next morning, I packed my belongings and left the house before they woke up. When I arrived at a nearby business hotel, my phone was filled with texts from Paul, who seemed to have just woken up before heading to work. Apparently, they were in quite a chaos this morning. Texts and calls from both of them quickly filled my phone with notifications. When I opened the text, I saw nothing but complaints, such as,
"What are you doing? I told you I'll need lunch."
Jean also sent a text in a mocking tone. "Are you wandering around after forgetting your responsibilities?" It seems they had a hard time just because I didn't prepare breakfast for them, which made me laugh a little. When I saw a call from Paul, who seemed to be on his lunch break, I decided to finally talk to him.
"You finally picked up. Mom, where the hell are you and what are you doing?"
"It's none of your business, is it?"
"You didn't even prepare our food. Where are you?"
"Paul, you're not a child. You can make your own food, can't you?" I answered him with a mix of irritation. If he had struggled so much to prepare just one meal, he should have reflected a little and thanked me. But to my surprise, he came back with a word I never expected.
"I'm paying for living expenses, so I need you to do the housework."
"Living expenses? What are you talking about? I never received such a thing."
"Huh? Why not? Jean should have been giving it to you every month, so don't lie."
Paul insisted that he was paying me living expenses. I've never received anything of the sort, and when I truthfully denied it, Paul started calling me a liar. The truth is, my husband covers all of their living expenses, including their food expenses. Even after repeatedly saying this, Paul refused to believe me. I could hear Jean in the background saying, "You're probably just playing dumb and spending it for yourself." Unable to continue the conversation, I cut them off and said, "I don't know what I don't know, and I don't plan to come home for a while."
"Why not? What are we supposed to do for food?"
"Figure it out yourselves. Bye now." I hung up the phone and let out another big sigh. Why do they believe they're not in the wrong, even after all this? I didn't understand what Paul was talking about earlier when he mentioned about our living expenses. The situation improved about a week after I left the house. My husband, who had come to check on me, apparently talked to Paul and Jean, and their text suddenly became more respectful and submissive. Wondering what had happened, I received a text from my husband.
"Paul and Jean want to apologize. If you feel like it, please come home."
Thanks to my husband's talk, they finally seemed to understand. I replied to my husband's text, made preparations, and decided to go home that day. When I returned home, Paul and Jean were waiting at the entrance, their faces pale and worn out. It seems that they were quite upset by the lecture from my husband. I decided to hear the story about this past week from them and my husband.
"About the living expenses I mentioned on the phone."
"I said I didn't receive them, right? You said you wanted to save money, so I didn't say anything."
"Actually, Dad was really mad at us about that."
It seems that my son had told his father about his contribution to the household expenses. It appeared that he believed I had been lying, and throughout he seemed to have painted me as the villain when speaking with his father. However, when his father explained that there was no way I could be splurging, as I was busy from morning to night with cleaning, shopping, preparing meals for 3 people, and doing the laundry while showing him our household book, he quieted down. "You couldn't even believe me?"
"But Jean kept saying that she was giving you the money."
"So what happened to your living expenses?" "I was using them." From my son's perspective, he was definitely paying the money, so he must have been baffled that the money was not reaching me. It seems that my husband and son confronted Jean and made her confess. At first, Jean was playing dumb, but when my husband started yelling at her, she finally confessed everything. I was shocked to hear this, as I had never seen my husband yell before. Apparently, Jean had been spending the money on dining out and going out with her colleagues from her part-time job. She had been going to fancy restaurants to show off and pocketing any leftover money for herself, she explained in a feeble voice. I'm appalled. She was accusing me of squandering money on the phone, but it turns out she was just talking about herself. But living with my in-laws can be stifling, and everyone was inviting me, so I just...
Just because of that, You thought it was okay to embezzle our living expenses. You made me look like a fool too.
What? You are acting all high and mighty too. At the point when the two of them began to stray from the topic and argue, my husband cleared his throat loudly. The two of them, seemingly terrified of my husband, jumped up in surprise and immediately became silent. I couldn't help but laugh at their behavior, like children who had been caught doing mischief.
Excuses, excuses. Cut the crap. First, you should sincerely apologize to your mom. Dad, I was also deceived by Jean. So, does that excuse your attitude towards your mother? Neither of you has apologized to her since she returned. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Finally, the two of them bowed their heads to me. Still, my son was making excuses, saying that he had been taking it easy because it was his home.
I've been getting busy at work, and I just wanted to relax at home. So what about your mother, who is being taken for granted and mocked by her big son and his wife even at her own home?
My husband's words cut through my son's excuses, leaving him speechless. I'm appalled at my son, who despite his age, still relies on his parents, and at Jean, who took advantage of that to embezzle money.
Mom, I'm sorry. You see, I'm apologizing to you.
Do you think an apology makes everything okay? Please reflect on yourself a bit. The two of them thought that bowing their heads to me would resolve everything smoothly, and they were flustered by my words and tried to make excuses. But I could see through their scheme, and I shook my head. Whether you contribute to the living expenses or not, I can't overlook that attitude. You have to learn to be more grateful. But aren't you worried about your future too, mother-in-law? Yes, I'm full of worries about relying on people like you.
How can you talk to us like that?
You splurged our living expense out of stress from living with us. I can't have someone like you stay with us any longer. The two of them finally quieted down, realizing that I was not willing to listen anymore. They need to learn once again how rude their actions were while living together as a couple. Later, we managed to have them move out. In the days that followed, Jean, my son's wife, started to come to our house occasionally to learn household chores from me. She continually vented about how my son Paul did not lift a finger to help with any housework. As she had always been showing off to her colleagues, I assumed she couldn't complain to anyone else now. I now understand just how much I relied on you, Karen. Indeed. And yet, you had the audacity to accuse me of being deaf and squandering money. Being no longer able to live with us and having lost the pocket money she freely used before, plus having her part-time wages limited to make up for the money she previously misused, Jean fervently complained about her now austere life. But however I listened, all I could think was that she was just reaping what she had sown. As for Paul, he started to bring home delicious snacks as gifts from time to time, as if making up for his previous lack of consideration, which he still mentioned occasionally. I've always known he wasn't the most articulate and was primarily focused on work. Nevertheless, I was touched by the fact that he recognized my hard work during our discussions with Paul and Jean. Thanks for your hard work, honey. I appreciate it. I'm glad that I can talk to my husband like this again. I deeply feel the truth in the saying, after a storm comes a calm. Regardless of how it started, I'm now leading a life that is calmer and happier than before.
Ugh, you all need to shut up, always nagging at me. Yeah, I get it. I'm the bad guy here. Happy now?
Laughing flippantly, the person speaking to me was embarrassingly my husband. If I had known he was such a lowlife from the beginning, I never would have married him. But now, it's too late. As I was thinking this, an unexpected voice yelled at my stupid husband. What? My name is Emily, a 28-year-old office worker. I live with my husband Liam and we don't have any children yet. I also have my precious little chihuahua, Lulu, who I've had since I was single. She's a clever little troublemaker, always scratching at drawers to drag things out.
Oh, by the way, I'm having dinner with Ethan next Saturday night.
My husband mentioned this over dinner.
With your brother. You two are really close, aren't you?
Ethan is my brother. My husband and brother have been friends since elementary school and quickly became close because of their shared interests like soccer. Sometimes I even get jealous of how close they are.
Ethan told me the other day, has Emily's cooking ever made you sick?
Ugh, my brother is still as rude as ever. I was a bit annoyed by that comment. If you have an older sibling, you may relate, but I think there are two types. One is the type that dotes on the younger sibling. One of my friends has a younger sister and loves her even more than her parents do, she claims. The other type is a bully, always demanding what's yours. My brother falls into this category.
Huh? Not eating the strawberry? Well, I'll take it then.
The person who would casually swipe the strawberry off my cake that I was saving for last was my brother. Even now, it makes me mad. My brother and I have never really gotten along. But I do owe him one big thank you.
One of my friends wants your number. Some people have weird tastes, huh?
He said this with a sigh, handing over the contact info. That friend turned out to be Liam, my now husband. So my brother was like a cupid for our love. When we decided to get married, my drunken brother said to Liam,
"You sure about this? You can still back out. She's like a gorilla at home, you know."
To which my husband replied,
"You're the only one who thinks that. I've been interested in Emily for a long time."
That's what my husband told me. His words were met with a gross, oh, from my brother. What an awful brother. My husband Liam was a star of the soccer team and was quite popular in our generation. Thinking back, my brother was just as popular, but I never understood why. At home, he was arrogant, selfish, and gorilla-like. Wait, am I saying the same thing as my brother? Even after marriage, Liam was as kind as ever, and I was very happy. I didn't realize that this happiness was slowly beginning to crumble. One day, my husband came home visibly frustrated.
Oh, today was the worst.
Welcome back. Oh, what happened? It was rare for Liam to get this angry. Apparently, as he was about to get in the car to come home, he noticed a scratch on it. He said it wasn't there this morning, but he honestly wasn't sure when it happened.
I should have installed a dash cam.
My husband's car didn't have a dash cam. I had one in my car, but my husband has been driving his current car for nearly 10 years because he likes it. I had suggested getting a dash cam, but he said,
I have never been in an accident or anything, so I think I'm good for now.
He kept putting it off, saying things like that, but this time he seemed quite upset.
Emily, I'm sorry, but can you go to the car shop tomorrow and get a dash cam installed? I don't really understand machines.
Since I had the next day off from work and had no particular plans, I gladly agreed. The next day, my husband went to work in my car. I had driven my husband's car a few times, but as someone who usually drives a compact car, his larger car felt a little scary to me. That night, when I told my husband that the installation was successfully completed, he was in high spirits, saying,
Now I can feel safe no matter what happens.
Seeing his response, I thought to myself, that's right, I can feel safe no matter what happens too, and smiled a little. Soon after, my husband would fall into hell. Around this time, I noticed that my brother had been contacting me more often. It wasn't anything serious, just casual conversations like, how have you been? Or, are you getting along with Liam? Mostly, we shared trivial updates about our lives. I found my brother's behavior a little strange, but I thought, maybe he's finally starting to find his little sister cute? Bro, it's great that you're friends with Liam, but you're going out drinking too much lately. When I said that, my brother went silent for a moment, then said,
sorry. Naomi and I have been fighting a lot and I have things I want to talk about.
He laughed over the phone. Naomi is my brother's wife and my sister-in-law. My brother and Naomi were high school classmates and have been dating since then. I don't think of my brother this way, but he and the beautiful Naomi were known as the most attractive couple in school. I was also close to Naomi, as she was my senior in the same club, and we had been friends since our student days. Then, one day, something happened. I still remember vividly. It was a day of heavy rain from the morning, and my husband was in a bad mood as he watched the weather forecast.
Oh, rain all day. I hate going to the company for negotiations today. The road is narrow.
His company doesn't have company cars. They reimburse for gas, but employees must use their personal cars for outside work. Recently, the company's performance has been improving. and the president has finally started considering buying a few company cars next year. He happily told me the other day, so I said to him, "Why don't you use my car today?" I realized after I said it that my car is pink and maybe it's too cute for my husband to drive. He seemed to think the same thing, hesitated for a moment, but then said,
Is that okay? Last time I drove Emily's car. It handled well. I'll take you up on that.
and he went to work as usual. Well, time for me to go to work too. With that thought, I left the house as usual. The rain was getting stronger, almost like a typhoon. My usual commute route looked like a different road in the heavy rain, even with the wipers on full blast, and today I was commuting in my husband's unfamiliar car. I shouldn't have switched cars, I thought. That's when it happened. Ah! With a loud thud, the car I was driving crashed into a utility pole. At first, I didn't understand what had happened, but when I slowly opened my eyes, I saw a passenger car right next to mine. That's right, that car suddenly jumped out from the side, and I swerved to avoid it and hit the pole. Then I lost consciousness. I thought I heard the sounds of police and ambulance sirens in the distance. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. "Hey, Ethan, Emily's awake!" A familiar voice. It was my sister-in-law, Naomi. Naomi, why are you here? Where am I? Ouch! I felt a little pain, perhaps from hitting my head. My hands and feet moved properly. If I hadn't turned the steering wheel at the last moment during the accident, I might not be alive now. The thought sent chills down my spine.
Hey, Emily, stay still. Lie down quickly. I'm here with you.
My brother, with tears in his eyes for some reason, was sitting next to Naomi. Seeing my brother like that, Naomi chuckled. "Ethan, you're overreacting. Calm down." Looking at the two of them, I asked, more importantly, why are you two here? Where's Liam? At my question, the smiles on their faces vanished instantly.
The hospital tried to contact Liam first from your address book, but he didn't answer because he was at work, so they called me next.
My brother explained. I had written emergency contacts in my address book. First was, of course, my husband Liam. Second, after considering my parents, I chose my brother who lives nearby. Third were my parents. It seemed the hospital had contacted them from my belongings after I was rushed in. Then, the two of them looked at each other with awkward faces. "It's okay, big brother. I have a pretty good idea of what's going on," I told them. The day I drove my husband's car to get the dashcam installed, I felt something off the moment I got in. A strong perfume scent, familiar and unpleasant. That's right, our dog Lulu barked more than usual at my husband the other day, and I smelled the scent then. My woman's intuition kicked in, and I opened the dashboard. Recent movie ticket stubs and a single earring I hadn't recognized fallen under the passenger seat. It seemed my bad feeling had come true. At my worst, the two looked surprised but said, "Calm down, okay?" My brother showed me something. I knew it. Afterwards, the doctor came into the room and examined me. There were no abnormalities in my brain or body. The pain in my head was from a scratch on my forehead, which would heal naturally in a few days without leaving a scar. I was relieved as I didn't want a scar.
It's near a miracle that you came out of that accident with only this. You're really lucky,
the doctor said. My brother and his wife were relieved at the test results, telling me to call them if I needed anything. After saying that, he and his wife went home. A while later, my husband Liam rushed into the hospital room looking frantic.
Emily, you had an accident? Are you okay?
I explained to my husband what had happened and that I needed to stay in the hospital for a few days. Then my husband said,
Oh, it's not a big deal then. I had so many missed calls from the hospital, I thought I didn't need to rush here.
He sighed and said that to me. I stared at my husband with cold eyes and told him that I was thinking of going back to my parents' house to rest for a while after being discharged from the hospital. The moment I mentioned it, my husband's voice noticeably perked up.
Oh, that's great. You don't have to worry about me. Take it easy at your parents' place. I'll even come to pick you up. No problem.
His face was clearly delighted. Looking at him, I thought from the bottom of my heart that he was an idiot. As if I would worry about you. I had suspected it, but my husband was indeed having an affair. The fact that he could be so callous to his wife who might have lost her life showed that he was quite infatuated with his lover. His insistence on picking me up from my parents' house was a clear sign that he didn't want me to come home unexpectedly. Enjoy it while you can, you better be prepared. A few days later, my husband came to pick me up when I was discharged. We stopped by our house to pack and then headed straight to my parents' home. Usually, I would sit in the front passenger seat when going out with my husband, but this time I deliberately sat in the back.
Make sure you call me when you want me to pick you up.
Absolutely. I almost laughed at my all-too-obvious husband but managed to hold it in. Yeah, I understand. Sorry that you'll have to use my car for a while. I didn't feel bad at all, but I spoke apologetically. My husband replied,
No problem at all. I like this car.
He cheerfully said he would take good care of my car and went home in a good mood. I like that car, but I will never drive it again. About a week after returning to my parents' house, I went back to our home. I'm home! I shouted loud enough to be heard in any room. Sure enough, I heard a commotion from the back room. A few minutes later, my husband came rushing out.
Hey, I told you to call, didn't I? Why did you come back all of a sudden?
He seemed quite flustered, almost angry. Oh, I forgot. Maybe it's because I hit my head in the accident. Sorry. But more importantly, I have something to talk to the person hiding in the back room. Can you bring her out? And hey, your clothes are inside out, I said with a bright smile. My husband's face turned pale in an instant. And then he finally realized that behind me were my parents, my brother and his wife, and even his own parents who had come all the way.
What? Why?
His father, a strict man, yelled, "Bring her out now!" A few minutes later, after letting everyone into the living room, my husband and his lover awkwardly entered from the back room. No wonder they were uncomfortable. It was 2 against 7. My husband was overwhelmingly at a disadvantage. The two of them looked down and didn't say a word. Everyone, including me, was irritated. It's been a while, hasn't it? Maria, right? At my words, the two of them flinched. I knew this woman. She was a year younger than me in high school and was a soccer team's manager. My brother and I were a year apart, and my husband and Maria only overlapped for 1 year. She used to pick fights with me while waiting for Liam, my husband, after practice, even after he graduated and went to college. Emily, you're so tall and stylish. I'm really jealous. I'm so small, but Liam said he likes small girls, so it's surprising. She was the type to pick up fight with a smile on her face. That continued even after Liam graduated and went to college. When I contacted Liam the other day, he replied right away, and I was so happy. Please thank him for me, Emily. Or, they say that relationships between college students and high school students don't last long. Aren't you worried? Were some of the things she said. Back then, I had an inexplicable confidence that my husband was head over heels in love with me, so I didn't pay any attention to her. That must have been frustrating for Maria. I was worried about work, and suddenly Maria started sobbing. Her silly way of speaking hadn't changed at all, and it irritated me greatly. I almost lunged at her, but a glance at my sister-in-law Naomi, who was sitting next to me, told me she felt the same way. She was forcefully holding down her right hand with her left. The two of them explained that Maria worked at the reception desk of one of my husband's company's clients. They had reconnected over old stories and started meeting alone after work. But they insisted that there was nothing suspicious about their relationship.
It was just advice, nothing more.
My husband kept repeating this like a mantra. Is he crazy? Has he been cursed? Oh, Maria, I saw the tag on your skirt when you came into the room earlier. Isn't it inside out? Immediately, both of them checked her skirt, but of course I was lying. They made a face as if they had been caught, but it was too late. However, my husband's shirt really was inside out. What kind of advice requires you to take off your skirt in someone else's bedroom? Are you stupid? I said that to the two fools. Whether they didn't like my attitude or were too flustered to understand, my husband snapped.
Where's the evidence? It's unfair to accuse us without any evidence.
He actually had the nerve to get angry? My parents, in-laws, and I were so angry that our faces turned bright red. It was clear that everyone was furious.
Hey, you have been noisy since earlier,
my brother said, and then he played a video on the TV. It was the footage from the dashcam on the day of the accident. The loud thud made it clear that the impact was quite strong. The other driver, perhaps in shock, initially refused to admit fault. At the hospital, I apparently raged that I wasn't at fault. The police showed the footage to my brother who was nearby, and it clearly showed the other car speeding into me and running a red light just before the collision. This evidence led to the conclusion that it was almost entirely the other driver's fault. However, the footage before the accident clearly showed my husband and Maria happily driving together.
I don't want to go home yet.
Maria said, "You're really cute." My husband replied, stroking Maria's head at a red light. Then he said, "You're so helpless," and drove into a hotel parking lot. On another day, Maria said, "Work ended early. I wanted to see you. Is your wife okay with this?" My husband replied,
I told her I'm going out with Ethan, so it's totally fine.
and kissed Maria. Ugh! My mother-in-law started crying. Even though I had seen it once before, I felt nauseous.
I didn't know the inside of the car was being recorded. That's cheating.
My brother looked at my husband with cold eyes and said,
You know, Naomi has always been telling me that Liam is definitely cheating, but I always believed there was no way.
With a cold look, my brother stared at my husband. Naomi seemed to have stumbled upon an account on social media that looked like Maria's. There were no faces shown, but there were plenty of suggestive photos like a profile of my husband, the watch he wore, and the interior of his car. I immediately consulted my brother, but at first, he didn't believe it. I heard that this caused a lot of fights between my brother and his wife. Still, it seemed he had some doubts, and he told me that he had been contacting me regularly. The decisive factor was the dashcam footage from the day of the accident.
You know how I felt when I saw that footage? My brother asked.
My husband, after a brief silence, snapped back.
All of you are so annoying, always nagging. Okay, I was wrong. Happy now? Ha.
Oh, why didn't I notice what kind of a person he was? I wish I could go back to my youth. As I was lost in thought, an unexpected person yelled at my husband who was laughing in front of me. It was not my brother, sister-in-law, or in-laws, but my daddy, who had been silently listening to the conversation.
Hey, you! Who do you think you are? What's with that attitude? What are you doing to my daughter?
My brother and I unconsciously trembled at the sight of Daddy like this. My parents are gentle people, especially Daddy, who once said, "Look, Emily, this flower is trying hard to live too." When I was young, I stepped on a flower, and he said this so quietly and kindly. He was kind, even to plants. There was only one time when Daddy, who was like a Buddha, lost his temper with my brother and me. I think it was when my brother and I didn't listen to Mom at all, and then a door in the corner of my memory seemed to open. My brother and I, who usually don't get along, vowed deeply at that moment never to make Daddy angry again. My husband, who had been so bold until now completely subdued by the sight of Daddy, who was completely different than usual. Standing like a guardian deity, Daddy was next to my mother, who was looking at my husband as if he were filth. Afterwards, my in-laws bowed deeply to our family and took my foolish husband home. By the way, Maria, the other woman, was sent home on foot. As they were leaving, my brother told my husband, "I will never forgive you for hurting my precious sister." He said it quietly. By the way, my husband used my brother as an excuse for his secret meetings with his lover, thinking that my brother and I were on bad terms and wouldn't pry too much. "I want to slap you with this right hand right now, but it would hurt my hand. You're not even worth that pain," said my sister-in-law Naomi. Naomi and I were former volleyball players. Unlike me, who was always a reserve, Naomi was the ace attacker. Just thinking about her slapping someone sends shivers down my spine. My ex-husband should consider himself lucky to have escaped with his life. After some time, our divorce was finalized. Thanks to my in-laws, my ex-husband reluctantly paid the compensation in the divorce settlement, spending all his money.
I'll buy a new car with the insurance money from the accident.
My ex-husband was all excited about this, but the insurance money for his old car wasn't enough to buy a new one. After paying me the compensation, he was left with just enough to buy a used compact car.
Oh man, driving a compact car is shameful.
My ex-husband, who had this prejudice, was happily driving my car even though his own car was totaled in the accident. The reason? Maria, his mistress, had said, "This car is so cute," and his happy face was clearly captured on my dashcam. Speaking of Maria, she seems to have borrowed money from her parents to pay me the compensation in the divorce settlement. Now, under her strict parents' watch, she's working non-stop to pay off the debt. Her relationship with my ex-husband continued for a while, but he became neurotic due to Maria's emotional ups and downs, quit his job suddenly, and now his whereabouts are unknown. Despite this situation, Maria's social media had a single line, "Finally, he's mine. I'll chase him forever." Yes, it seems like it was written only one word. It's like something out of a horror story. My ex-husband got involved with a terrible woman, but that's his problem now. It does not matter to me. As for me, I sold my tainted car and used the money as a down payment for a new one. I rented a place near my office and am living happily with my beloved dog Lulu. Come to think of it, Lulu never warmed up to my ex-husband. Maybe it was her animal instinct? I have been visiting my parents more often, and recently, we celebrated their wedding anniversary with my brother and his wife. As I was serving a strawberry whole cake, I asked my brother, who was sitting next to me, "Brother, do you want a strawberry?" He replied, "Yes, please," like a child. I looked at my brother eating the strawberry with a smile. It seems that from now on, my brother and I will get along well.